The dust swirled around Clara Mayfield's worn boots as she stepped off the stagecoach in Silver Creek, Nevada. The year was 1873, and the small mining town sprawled before her like a collection of weathered wooden bones bleaching under the unforgiving sun. She clutched her modest carpetbag with both hands, the weight of it nothing compared to the burden she carried in her heart. 6 months had passed since Thomas died in that cursed mine collapse, leaving her with nothing but memories and debts. The bank had taken their small farm in Missouri, and pride had prevented her from begging relatives for charity. So here she stood, a 26-year-old widow in a town that seemed to eye her with the same suspicion it reserved for rattlesnakes and claim jumpers. The main street stretched before her, lined with establishments that spoke of quick fortunes and quicker losses. The Silver Dollar Saloon dominated one side, its bat-wing doors swinging with the constant traffic of miners seeking solace in whiskey and cards. Across the way, Garrett's General Store displayed goods in windows hazed with alkali dust. The sharp ring of hammer on anvil echoed from the blacksmith shop, punctuating the low murmur of rough voices and creaking wagon wheels. Clara straightened her shoulders, smoothing down her black morning dress, the only decent garment she still owned. The fabric had grown thin at the elbows and hem, but she'd mended it carefully during the long journey west. Appearances mattered, especially for a woman alone. She'd learned that lesson quickly enough on the trail. The silver dollar seemed her most likely prospect for employment. Respectable women didn't work in saloons, but respectability didn't pay for food or lodging. She'd already inquired at the 2 boarding houses in town, only to be turned away when she couldn't produce a week's rent in advance. The hotel clerk had looked at her with barely concealed disdain when she'd asked about housekeeping positions. "Best try the saloon, ma'am," he'd said, his meaning clear in the curl of his lip. Now, standing before those swinging doors, Clara felt the last of her Eastern sensibilities crumble like dried clay. She pushed through, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the dimness within. The interior assaulted her senses, tobacco smoke thick as morning fog, the sharp bite of cheap whiskey, the underlying odor of unwashed bodies and desperation. A piano tinkled in the corner, played by a man who seemed to have learned his trade from a deaf teacher. Miners clustered around tables, their voices rising and falling with their fortunes at cards. Behind the long bar, a heavy-set man with pomaded hair and a stained apron eyed her approach. This would be Sam Hutchins, the proprietor she'd been told about. His gaze traveled from her dusty boots to her carefully pinned hair, cataloging her like merchandise. "Help you, ma'am." His voice carried the false politeness of a man already calculating profit. "Mr. Hutchins, I'm seeking employment." Clara kept her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "I'm a hard worker. I can clean, serve drinks, whatever you need." Hutchins's smile revealed a gold tooth. "That's so you worked a saloon before?" "No, sir, but I'm quick to learn." "I bet you are." He leaned forward, elbows on the bar. "Thing is, my girls do more than just serve drinks. They keep the customers happy. If you take my meaning, pretty thing like you, even in them widow's weeds, could do real well." Heat rose to Clara's cheeks, but she held his gaze. "I'll serve drinks and food. Mr. Hutchins, nothing more." His laughter drew attention from nearby tables. "Listen, honey, this ain't no tea parlor. You want charity? Try the church, though I doubt Reverend Pearson's got much sympathy for saloon girls." "I'm not asking for charity, just honest work." "Honest?" Hutchins snorted. "You're in the wrong town for that, Mrs. Mayfield. Clara Mayfield." "Well, Mrs. Mayfield, I'll give you a chance. $1 a day plus tips. But you smile pretty, and you don't complain when the boys get friendly. First sign of trouble, you're out. We clear." Clara's stomach turned, but hunger spoke louder than pride. "When do I start?" "Now, if you're ready, Martha." He bellowed toward a door behind the bar. A woman emerged, perhaps 40, with hennaed hair and a dress that had seen better decades. "Show the new girl where to hang her coat. She's working the floor tonight." Martha looked Clara up and down with the weary assessment of someone who'd seen too many hopeful faces turn hard. "Come on, then. Let's find you an apron." As Clara followed Martha to the back room, she noticed a man sitting alone at a corner table, nursing a whiskey. Unlike the boisterous miners, he sat still as stone, his weathered face partially hidden by the brim of his hat. Something about his stillness drew her eye, a quality of watchfulness that spoke of danger carefully leashed. Their gazes met for an instant before Clara looked away. But in that moment she'd seen eyes the color of winter sky, holding depth she couldn't fathom. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, silver against sun-darkened skin. "That's Jonas Reed," Martha said, following her glance. "Keeps to himself, mostly. Runs a horse ranch outside town. Used to be something else, they say, but ain't nobody fool enough to ask what." Clara stored the information away as Martha handed her a stained apron. "Some advice. Honey, don't look them in the eye too long. Don't let them box you into corners. And whatever you do, don't take drinks from customers. Sam don't like his girls getting sloppy." "I'm not one of his girls. I'm just serving drinks." Martha's laugh held no humor. "Sure you are, honey. We all started out just serving drinks." The evening descended into a blur of grasping hands, crude jokes, and spilled whiskey. Clara learned to sidestep wandering fingers while balancing a tray, to smile without encouraging, to pour drinks while keeping herself just out of reach. Her feet ached in her worn boots, and her face hurt from the forced pleasant expression. As the night wore on, the crowd grew rowdier. A group of miners fresh from the claims had struck a small vein and were determined to drink their success. One of them, a burly man with tobacco-stained beard, had been particularly persistent in his attentions. "Come on, pretty widow," he slurred, catching Clara's wrist as she tried to pass. "One dance. I got silver in my pocket and nowhere to spend it." "I don't dance, sir. Please let go." Clara tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Don't be like that. Your husband's in the ground. Ain't he about time you found a living man to warm your bed?" The words hit like a slap. Clara jerked hard, breaking free but sending her tray of glasses crashing to the floor. The saloon fell momentarily silent, all eyes turning to the spectacle. Hutchins' face darkened. "Damn it, girl, that's coming out of your pay." "I'm sorry, Sorry don't clean up glass, and Pete here's a good customer. You apologize to him proper." Clara looked at the leering miner, at Hutchins's expectant face, at the ring of amused spectators. This was the price of survival. Then, humiliation served with whiskey and sawdust. She was bending to gather the broken glass when a shadow fell across her. That same stillness she'd noticed earlier seemed to push back the crowd's energy. "Seems to me the ladies had enough trouble for one night." The voice was low, carrying an edge that made Pete step back despite his drunkenness. Clara looked up to find Jonas Reed standing between her and the crowd. Up close, she could see the careful way he held himself, balanced and ready. This was a man accustomed to violence, comfortable with it in a way that made others nervous. "Ain't your business, Reed," Pete blustered, but his voice had lost its aggressive edge. "I'm making it my business." Jonas turned to Hutchins. "What does she owe for the glasses?" $1.50. Jonas placed $2 silver on the bar. "For the glasses and her night's wage. She's done here." Hutchins' eyes narrowed. "Now hold on. Reed, you can't just—" "Yes, I can." There was no threat in Jonas's tone, just a statement of fact that somehow carried more weight than any bluster. Clara found her voice. "I don't need—" "Ma'am." Jonas turned to her, touching the brim of his hat. "You'll want to collect your things." Pride warred with pragmatism. She could stay, endure whatever came next, prove she could handle herself. Or she could accept this unexpected lifeline from a stranger whose motives remained unclear. Martha appeared at her elbow, pressing Clara's carpet bag into her hands. "Go on, honey. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth." Still, Clara hesitated. "I needed this job." "No," Jonas said quietly. "You didn't." Something in his tone, understanding rather than pity, decided her. She untied the apron, folded it carefully on the bar, and walked toward the door with as much dignity as she could muster. Jonas fell into step beside her, his presence creating a path through the crowd. The night air hit her lungs like cold water, sharp and cleansing after the saloon's fog. Clara gulped it gratefully, trying to steady her shaking hands. "Thank you," she managed. "Though I don't know why you... A woman like you shouldn't be in a place like that." A woman like me. Now that they were outside, anger replaced embarrassment. "You don't know anything about me, Mr. Reed. I know you're recently widowed. I know you're alone. And I know Sam Hutchins would have had you working upstairs within a week, willing or not." The blunt truth of it silenced her protest. She'd seen the calculation in Hutchins' eyes, the gradual wearing down of resistance he'd perfected. "I can take care of myself." "I'm sure you can, but you shouldn't have to." "Not like that." Jonas studied her for a moment, seeming to weigh a decision. "You need work. Are you offering..." "I run horses. Need someone to help with cooking. Keeping the books, maybe. Room and board plus wages. Respectable work." Clara searched his face, looking for the catch. There was always a catch. "And what would you expect in return?" His jaw tightened. "Nothing you're thinking. I've got no use for complications. You'd have your own quarters, locked door, no questions asked. I need help. You need work. Simple business." "Nothing's ever simple." "No," he agreed. "But it's better than the alternative waiting in there." She glanced back at the saloon, where laughter spilled out into the street along with yellow lamplight. Tomorrow she'd be hungrier, more desperate. How many tomorrows before she gave in to what seemed inevitable? "When would I start?" "Tonight, if you're willing. Ranch is an hour's ride. Got a wagon at the livery." Clara made her decision. Whatever Jonas Reed's secrets, and she sensed they were many, they couldn't be worse than the certain degradation waiting behind those bat-wing doors. "All right, Mr. Reed. But I'll warn you, I know nothing about horses." For the first time, his stern expression softened slightly. "They're easier to understand than people, Mrs. Mayfield. More honest, anyway." As they walked toward the livery stable, Clara caught a glimpse of something tucked almost hidden in his vest pocket, the edge of a silver chain. She wondered what kind of man carried hidden keepsakes while offering salvation to desperate widows. But then, she supposed, everyone in Silver Creek had their secrets. Some just wore them closer to the surface than others. The morning sun cast long shadows across Jonas Reed's ranch as Clara emerged from the small cabin that had been her home for 3 days now. The Double R Ranch spread before her, not large by territorial standards, but well kept, with sturdy corrals and a barn that spoke of careful maintenance. 20-odd horses grazed in the nearest pasture, their coats gleaming in the early light. She'd settled into a routine quickly enough, up before dawn to start breakfast. Tending to the books Jonas had apologetically shown her, his penmanship was atrocious, and learning the basic care of horses from Miguel, the elderly Mexican hand who lived in a bunkhouse near the barn. Jonas himself remained an enigma. He spoke little, appeared and disappeared like smoke, and maintained a careful distance that should have been reassuring but somehow wasn't. There was something in the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, a wariness that spoke of old wounds. This morning felt different. Jonas had mentioned riding into town for supplies, suggesting Clara accompany him to purchase whatever she might need for the kitchen. The prospect of returning to Silver Creek so soon made her stomach tighten, but practicality won. She needed things: flour, salt, thread to mend her worn dresses. She found Jonas in the barn, checking the hooves of a bay mare. He looked up at her approach, and she caught that flicker of something surprised that crossed his features whenever he saw her, as if he kept forgetting she was real. "Still willing to make that supply run?" Clara asked, smoothing her mended black dress. She'd washed it yesterday, but the dust of the territory had already crept back into its folds. "If you are." He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants. "Though you might want to change into something sturdier." Clara flushed. "This is all I have that's decent for town." Jonas was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "There's a trunk in the main house attic. Belonged to—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Might be something that fits." He'd never mentioned a wife, but Clara had seen the signs. A woman's touch lingered in the main house like a ghost, faded curtains chosen with care, a rocking chair by the fireplace worn smooth in telling places. She didn't pry. They both had their graves to tend. An hour later, wearing a simple calico dress that fit well enough, Clara sat beside Jonas on the wagon seat as they rolled toward town. The dress smelled faintly of lavender and long storage. She wondered about the woman who'd worn it. What had become of her? Why her clothes remained when she was gone? "Thank you," she said, "for the dress." Jonas kept his eyes on the road. "No need to thank me. It was just taking up space." They rode in companionable silence until the edges of Silver Creek came into view. Clara's hands tightened in her lap as they passed the silver dollar. Through the windows, she could see Martha sweeping the floor, preparing for another night of false gaiety. Jonas must have noticed her tension. "We'll stick to Garrett's store. In and out quick." But Silver Creek was a small town with a long memory. They'd barely entered Garrett's general store when Clara heard the whispers start. Mrs. Garrett, a pinch-faced woman who ruled the town's social hierarchy with an iron fist, looked Clara up and down with obvious disapproval. "Mrs. Mayfield," she said, the title dripping with skepticism. "Heard you found yourself a position." "Yes, ma'am. I'm working for Mr. Reed." "So I gathered." Her gaze moved to Jonas, who was examining bridles with apparent fascination. "Rather sudden, wasn't it? One might almost think it was planned." Heat rose to Clara's cheeks. "Mr. Reed was kind enough to offer respectable employment when I needed it most." Respectable. Mrs. Garrett managed to make the word sound like an accusation. "Well, I suppose we all must make our way somehow, though one does wonder what skills a woman like you brings to ranch work." Before Clara could respond, Jonas appeared at her elbow. "Mrs. Mayfield keeps my books and manages the household. She's proven quite capable." His tone was pleasant enough, but there was steel underneath. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have supplies to purchase." They completed their shopping in tense silence, Clara acutely aware of the eyes following their movements. At the counter, Jonas paid for her selections without comment: flour, salt, thread, some fabric for new clothes, small luxuries like soap and writing paper. Outside, Clara helped load the supplies, trying to ignore the cluster of women who'd gathered to gossip. Their words carried clearly in the still air. "Living out there alone with him? It ain't proper." "What choice does she have? No decent man would marry a widow who's worked in a saloon." "Mark my words. There'll be scandal before." "Clara?" She looked up to find Pete, the miner from the saloon, swaying on the boardwalk. His clothes were rumpled, and he smelled like he'd continued last night's drinking into the morning. "Thought that was you." He grinned, revealing missing teeth. "All dressed up like a lady. Read buy you that dress." "Mr. Thompson." Jonas's voice was deceptively calm as he stepped between them. "I believe you have somewhere else to be." "Just being friendly, Reed. Wanted to apologize to the lady for the other night." Pete's eyes never left Clara. "Though I still think she owes me that dance." "You're drunk. Move along." Pete's face darkened. "You ain't her keeper." Read. Lesson you already sampled what Hutchins was selling." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Clara saw Jonas's hand move just slightly toward his hip, where she now noticed the outline of a holster beneath his coat. "Mr. Reed," she touched his arm lightly. "We should go, please." For a moment, she thought he might not listen. The tension in his body was like a coiled spring, ready to snap. Then, slowly, he relaxed. "You're right. Mrs. Mayfield." He helped her onto the wagon seat with exaggerated courtesy. "Good day, Thompson," as they drove away. Clara could feel the weight of watching eyes. The gossip would be all over town by nightfall, growing more sordid with each telling. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I've brought you trouble." "That wasn't trouble, just a drunk fool running his mouth." "You know what they're saying, what they think." Jonas was quiet for a long moment. Let them think it. Their opinions don't change anything. But Clara had seen his face when Pete made his crude insinuation. There was more at stake here than just reputation. They were almost back to the ranch when Jonas suddenly pulled the wagon to a stop. His jaw was tight, and he seemed to be wrestling with some internal decision. "There's something you should know," he said finally. "About why I stepped in that night." Clara waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. "I was married once, Sarah. She was—" He paused, searching for words. "She was everything good I never deserved. Came out from Ohio to marry me when I was still trying to make something of myself. The ranch was just a dream then." The pain in his voice was raw, despite the careful control. "There was trouble with some men I'd known before. From my past, they came looking for me. Found her instead." His hands tightened on the reins. "By the time I got home, it was too late. She'd tried to defend herself, but—" Clara felt her heart constrict. "Jonas, you don't have to—" "I do. You need to understand." He turned to look at her directly. "That night in the saloon, watching Hutchins and the others circling you like wolves. I couldn't let it happen again. Couldn't stand by and watch another woman get destroyed because of men's appetites and greed." The confession hung between them, explaining so much his careful distance, the ghost of a woman in his house, the violence that simmered just beneath his controlled surface. "Is that why you offered me work out of guilt?" "Maybe at first." He was honest, at least. "But you've proven you can stand on your own feet. The work you've done, the way you've handled Miguel, the books. Sarah would have liked you." It was the highest compliment he could offer. Clara realized. She thought of her own losses, the weight of grief they both carried. "Mr. Reed Jonas, what happened to your wife wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it?" His laugh was bitter. "I brought violence into her life, made her a target. Same way I might be making you one now." "I'm not her, and I'm not as fragile as you think." He studied her for a long moment. "No, you're not, which might be the problem." Before Clara could ask what he meant, Jonas snapped the reins, setting the horses in motion again. But as they approached the ranch, she noticed he kept checking the horizon, as if expecting trouble to materialize from the sage and dust. That evening, as Clara prepared dinner, she found herself thinking about the trunk in the attic. Sarah's trunk. Tomorrow, she decided, she would go through it properly, not just taking what was needed, but trying to understand the woman whose ghost still haunted this place. She was setting the table when Jonas appeared in the doorway, something in his hand. "I've been thinking," he said, uncharacteristically hesitant, "about what happened in town, the talk. It doesn't matter what they say. It does, though. For you." He stepped forward, and she saw what he held, a small, worn ring box. "This was Sarah's. I've carried it, well, for too long." Clara's breath caught. "Jonas, what are you—" "Hear me out." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small chip of amber at its center. "You wear this in town. Tell people we married quick and quiet. It'll stop most of the talk. Give you protection. A fake marriage. A necessary fiction. You'd still have your own quarters. Nothing would change here. But in town, you'd be Mrs. Reed, not the widow who worked at the Silver Dollar. Clara stared at the ring, understanding both the practicality and the cost of what he was offering. To wear his dead wife's ring, to claim a place she hadn't earned, to live a lie that might become harder to maintain than the truth. I can't, it wouldn't be right. Sarah wouldn't mind. She was practical like that. Jonas set the box on the table between them. Think about it. The offer stands. He left before she could respond. The ring box sitting on the scrubbed wood table like a question waiting to be answered. Clara touched it gently, thinking of the woman who'd worn it, the man who'd carried it, and the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, the sound lonely and wild. Clara closed the box and slipped it into her apron pocket, the weight of it a reminder that some decisions couldn't be rushed. But even as she finished preparing dinner, her mind kept returning to Jonas's words, "You're not as fragile as you think," which might be the problem. She was beginning to understand what he meant. In a land where strength invited challenge and weakness invited prey, perhaps the most dangerous thing was to be neither, to exist in that space between where anything might happen. The ring box pressed against her hip as she moved. Sarah's legacy waiting for an answer Clara wasn't yet ready to give. The ring box sat on Clara's dresser for 3 days, unopened since that evening. Each morning she'd glance at it while pinning up her hair, and each night she'd touch it briefly before extinguishing her lamp. It had become a physical manifestation of all the questions she couldn't answer. On the 4th morning, she found Jonas already at breakfast when she entered the kitchen unusual, as he typically ate after the early chores. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes suggesting another sleepless night. "Coffee's fresh," he said without looking up from the ledger he was studying. Clara poured herself a cup, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Trouble." "Maybe. Got word that Henry Talbot's been asking about the ranch?" "About you." The name meant nothing to her, but the way Jonas said it, carefully controlled, set her nerves on edge. "Who's Henry Talbot?" "Owns the biggest mining operation in the territory. Also owns pieces of most everything else, the bank, 2 saloons in Carson City, stakes in the railroad coming through." Jonas closed the ledger slowly. "We've had disagreements in the past." "What kind of disagreements?" "The kind that don't get forgotten." He met her eyes then, and she saw something that made her stomach tighten. Fear. Not for himself, she realized, but for her. "He's been pressuring folks to sell. Wants to consolidate the whole valley before the railroad makes land prices soar." "You refuse to sell?" "Among other things." Jonas stood, moving to the window that overlooked the road to town. "Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did you know your husband before you married him? His background? I mean..." The question caught her off guard. "Of course, Thomas was a farmer's son from Missouri. We courted for a year before..." She stopped, seeing his expression. "Why? Your husband ever mention why he left Missouri? Why he was really working in Talbot's mine?" A chill ran through her. "He said there was good money in mining, that we could save enough to buy our own land." "Clara," Jonas turned from the window. "I had Miguel ask around after Talbot started sniffing. Your husband wasn't just any miner. He was a powder man, an explosives expert. Those are rare, valuable. The kind of man Talbot would have specifically recruited." "Thomas knew about farming, not explosives." "You're mistaken." But even as she said it, memories surfaced Thomas's clever hands, his way with mechanical things, the books on chemistry she'd found in his effects, the way he'd sometimes stared at nothing, lost in thoughts he never shared. "The accident that killed him," Jonas continued gently. It wasn't a cave-in. It was a powder blast. Talbot hushed it up. But 5 men died because someone set the charges wrong, or maybe... He paused. Maybe because someone set them exactly right. Clara sank into a chair, her mind reeling. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Talbot doesn't let valuable assets go easily. And now he's interested in you, the widow of a man who might have known things Talbot wanted kept quiet." The morning sun streaming through the window suddenly felt cold. Clara thought of Thomas's last weeks, how distracted he'd been. The arguments about leaving the mine that always ended with him promising just a little longer. "He's afraid I know something." "Or he thinks you have something, papers, maybe letters." Jonas moved closer, his voice urgent. "Is there anything Thomas left behind, anything unusual?" Clara shook her head, then stopped. There was a lockbox in his things, but it was empty when I opened it, just some old photographs and our marriage certificate. "You're sure it was empty?" She pictured the box, remembered her grief-numbed fingers sorting through the meager contents. "There was a false bottom. I noticed it was loose, but I couldn't bear to look through everything then." Jonas was already moving. "Where is it?" "In my room, under the bed." She followed him, propriety forgotten in the face of potential danger. Jonas retrieved the small metal box, examining it with practiced fingers. The false bottom came away easily, revealing a thin space beneath. And papers. Several sheets covered in Thomas's careful handwriting, along with what looked like survey maps. Jonas spread them on the bed, his face growing grimmer as he read. Clara leaned over his shoulder, trying to make sense of the technical drawings and columns of figures. "Powder quantities," Jonas said quietly. "Blast patterns. And here," he pointed to a roughly sketched map. "These are the mine tunnels, but these marks..." "What?" "They're not mining marks. They're military notation, weak points, choke points." He looked up at her. "Your husband was mapping how to destroy Talbot's entire operation." Clara's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the bed, staring at the papers that rewrote everything she thought she knew about her marriage. Why would he do that? Could be lots of reasons. Maybe Talbot forced him into something. Maybe he discovered something in those tunnels worth keeping buried. Or maybe... Jonas gathered the papers carefully. Maybe someone paid him to... Thomas wasn't a saboteur. He was a good man. Good men do desperate things sometimes. There was understanding in Jonas's voice, the weight of his own past coloring the words. "Question is, what do we do about it now?" Before Clara could answer, the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Jonas moved to the window in one fluid motion, his hand dropping to his gun. "3 riders," he said. "Stay here." But Clara was already beside him, looking out at the men dismounting in the yard. The one in front was well-dressed despite the dust of travel, with silver at his temples and the bearing of a man used to being obeyed, even without introduction. She knew this was Henry Talbot. "I should go down," she said. "No." Jonas's response was immediate. "You don't know what he's here about Thomas, about me." Clara straightened her spine, finding the steel that had carried her this far. "Hiding won't change that." Jonas caught her arm as she turned to go. "Clara, this isn't your fight." "It became my fight the day Thomas died." She gently pulled free. "But I won't face him empty-handed." She looked meaningfully at the ring box still visible through the open door to her room. Jonas followed her gaze, understanding dawning. "You're sure?" "A widow is vulnerable. A wife has protection." Clara retrieved the box, opening it to reveal Sarah's ring. "If we're going to tell a lie, might as well make it a useful one." Jonas took the ring from the box with steady hands, though she saw the emotion he fought to control. The amber caught the morning light, warm as honey. "I'm sorry it has to be this way," he said quietly. "Sarah deserved better. So do you." Sarah would understand. Clara held out her left hand, surprised to find it wasn't shaking. We do what we must to survive. The ring slipped onto her finger as if it belonged there. For a moment, they stood frozen, the weight of the gesture false though it was settling over them both. Then voices from the yard broke the spell. Jonas's face hardened into the mask she'd seen him wear in town. Let me do the talking. And Clara, he met her eyes. Whatever happens, don't let him separate us. Men like Talbot are wolves. They isolate the weak from the herd. They descended together, Clara's hand resting lightly on Jonas's arm in a show of wifely unity. The ring felt strange on her finger. Another woman's promise, now her shield. Talbot was examining one of Jonas's horses when they emerged, running an appreciative hand along its flank. Up close, Clara could see the calculation in his eyes, the kind of man who saw everything in terms of profit and loss. Mr. Reed. Talbot's smile was all teeth. And you must be the former Mrs. Mayfield, though I hear congratulations are in order. I'm Mrs. Reed now, Jonas said evenly. What brings you out here, Talbot? Just being neighborly. Wanted to pay my respects to Thomas Mayfield's widow. He was a valued employee. Talbot's gaze fixed on Clara with uncomfortable intensity. Such a tragic loss. You must have been devastated, my dear. My wife has mourned her first husband appropriately. Jonas interjected. Is there something specific you wanted? Actually, yes. Talbot's friendly mask slipped slightly. Mrs. Reed. Your late husband may have had some company property in his possession when he died. Documents, maps. Nothing of value to anyone else, but the company would like them returned. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, Clara said. Thomas kept his work at the mine. Of course, but sometimes men bring work home. Perhaps in a box, a case. His eyes sharpened. I'd be happy to compensate you for any inconvenience. Say, $500. It was more money than Thomas had made in a year. The offer hung in the air like bait in a trap. That's generous, Clara said carefully. But I've been through Thomas's things. There were no company papers. Talbot's jaw tightened. Perhaps you missed something. Grief can make us overlook things. I'd be happy to send men to help you search. That won't be necessary. Jonas stepped slightly forward. My wife said there were no papers. That's the end of it. Is it? Talbot's veneer of politeness cracked. See, I find it hard to believe a man like Mayfield meticulous. Careful wouldn't have kept records, especially given the sensitive nature of his work. Whatever Thomas knew about your business died with him. Clara said, I'm a rancher's wife now. Mr. Talbot, the past is buried. Nothing stays buried in the desert. Mrs. Reed. The wind always uncovers what's hidden. Talbot's smile was cold. But perhaps you're right. Perhaps I'm troubling you over nothing. He turned to go, then paused. Oh, one more thing. I heard you had some trouble in town the other day. That drunk miner bothering you. Pete Thompson. Clara felt Jonas tense beside her. What about him? Found him this morning, dead in an alley. Knife work. Ugly business. Talbot's eyes never left Clara's face. The sheriff's looking into it, of course. But between you and me, Pete had a lot of enemies. Man who can't hold his liquor, can't watch his mouth. Well, these things happen. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Clara forced herself to remain still, to show no reaction. Terrible, she managed. His poor family? He had no family, no one to mourn him, no one to ask questions. Talbot touched the brim of his hat. I'll leave you to your day. But Mrs. Reed, if you do happen to remember anything about Thomas's work, anything at all, my offer stands. After all, a new marriage is expensive. I'm sure Mr. Reed could use the money. The insult to Jonas's pride was calculated, but Jonas didn't rise to it. They stood together, watching Talbot and his men mount up and ride away. Only when the dust had settled did Clara realize she was gripping Jonas's arm hard enough to leave marks. She let go, apologizing, but he caught her hand. "You did well," he said. "Most would have folded." "Pete Thompson, did Talbot really?" "Probably. It's how he works. Remove obstacles. Create fear." Jonas looked down at their joined hands, at Sarah's ring on Clara's finger. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." "I know." Clara surprised herself with the steadiness of her voice. "But I'm not running. Not again." Jonas studied her for a long moment. "No, you're not. Which means we need to prepare. Talbot won't stop at threats." They walked back toward the house, still linked by necessity and the lie they now shared. The morning that had started with questions about the past had become something else entirely, a declaration of war, with battle lines drawn around a ring that meant everything and nothing. At the door, Jonas paused. "Clara, what I said earlier, about good men doing desperate things, I wasn't just talking about Thomas." She met his eyes, seeing the weight he carried. "I know. I've done things that would make you—" "We all have our graves. Jonas." She touched the ring unconsciously. "Maybe it's time we stop digging them deeper." Inside, the papers still lay spread on her bed. Thomas's secrets waiting to be fully uncovered. But first, there was dinner to make, horses to tend, a marriage to pretend. The ordinary rhythms of life that somehow had to continue even as the ground shifted beneath their feet. Clara tucked the papers back in their hiding place, but kept the ring on her finger. Sarah's ring. Her ring now. For however long this dangerous game lasted. Through the window, she could see Jonas in the corral, his movements sharp with suppressed anger as he worked the horses. Whatever storm was coming, they would weather it together, two people bound by necessity, wearing their lies like armor against a world that devoured the weak. The desert wind picked up, rattling the windows like skeletal fingers. Somewhere out there, Pete Thompson's body was growing cold, a warning written in blood. But Clara had survived too much to be frightened by dead men. It was the living ones that worried her now. The weeks following Talbot's visit passed in deceptive quiet. Clara threw herself into ranch work, learning to gentle colts and mend tack under Miguel's patient instruction. The old vaquero had accepted her presence with surprising ease, treating her with the same gruff kindness he showed the horses. "Senora Reed," he said one afternoon as she struggled with a particularly stubborn knot in a lead rope. "The rope, she knows when you fight her. Be like water, not like stone." Clara relaxed her hands, and the knot came free. It was advice that applied to more than ranch work, she reflected, stealing a glance at Jonas as he worked with a young stallion in the far corral. Their pretend marriage had settled into careful, routine, polite distance by day, shared silence at evening meals. The ring on her finger had become familiar weight, though she sometimes caught Jonas staring at it with an expression she couldn't decipher. That night, she found him on the porch, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. The setting sun painted the desert in shades of blood and gold. "Expecting trouble?" she asked, settling into the other chair. "Always." He didn't look up from his work. Man who doesn't is a man who ends up dead. Clara watched his hands, scarred but steady. "Will you tell me about it, your past with Talbot?" For a long moment, only the whisper of cloth on metal broke the silence. Then Jonas spoke, his voice low. "I wasn't always a rancher. For a time, I hired out my gun to whoever paid best. Railroad companies, cattle barons, mining operations." He paused. "Including Talbot's." Clara kept quiet, sensing the weight of confession. "He hired me to clear out some small claims prospectors who'd found silver on land he wanted. I did the job, didn't ask questions about whether those claims were legitimate." Jonas's hands stilled. One of those prospectors had a daughter, 16 years old, when her father wouldn't sell. Talbot's men decided to persuade him through her. The implication hung heavy in the evening air. "I stopped them," Jonas continued. "Shot 2 of Talbot's men, helped the girl and her father disappear. That's when I quit the gun trade, bought this land, tried to become someone else." He finally looked at her. "But men like Talbot have long memories." "And Sarah, did she know?" "She knew enough. Knew the man she married had blood on his hands." His voice roughened. "Maybe that's why God let her die. Payment for my sins." "Stop!" Clara's voice came out sharper than intended. "Sarah's death wasn't divine punishment. It was evil men doing evil things. The same kind threatening us now." Jonas studied her in the dying light. "You believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, Thomas died for nothing, Sarah died for nothing, and we're all just victims waiting for our turn." Before Jonas could respond, the sound of approaching riders made them both tense. But instead of threat, a familiar figure emerged from the dusk. Sheriff Wade Coleman, alone and moving with purpose. Jonas rose, hand near his gun. "Sheriff, bit late for a social call." Coleman dismounted, his weathered face grave. "This ain't social. Reed, mind if we talk inside?" They gathered around the kitchen table. Coffee poured but untouched. Coleman looked tired, older than his 50 years. "There's been developments," he began, "about Pete Thompson's death." "Talbot already told us," Clara said. "A knife attack in an alley." "That's the story going around. But the doc who examined the body found something interesting. Pete was stabbed, all right, with a very particular kind of blade, thin, double-edged, professional work." Coleman met Jonas's eyes, the kind of knife Talbot's man Rourke carries. Jonas remained still. "You saying Talbot ordered the killing?" "I'm saying nothing official. Can't. Talbot owns half the town council, but unofficially." Coleman leaned forward. "Pete was drunk and talking the night he died, saying he had information about the mine accident that killed your husband, Mrs. Reed, claiming someone would pay good money for what he knew." Clara's breath caught. Thomas's death wasn't an accident. That's what Pete seemed to think. Course, Pete was a drunk who'd say anything for whiskey money. Coleman's expression suggested otherwise. But if Talbot believed him, he'd silence him, Jonas finished. Just like he'd silence anyone else who might know the truth. Coleman nodded slowly. "I've been sheriff here 12 years. Seen Talbot squeeze out smaller operations, buy up claims through intimidation. But lately, something's different. He's desperate, reckless. Word is the railroad consortium is reconsidering their route. Without that rail connection, his empire crumbles. So he needs the whole valley, including my ranch. Including your ranch. And maybe he needs something else, whatever your husband might have known. Ma'am." Clara thought of the papers hidden in her room. The maps marking vulnerable points in Talbot's mine. "Sheriff, are you warning us or threatening us?" Coleman stood, settling his hat. "Warning you, I enforce the law. But I ain't Talbot's man. You folks watch yourselves. And Reed." He paused at the door. "That young stallion you're training, he's got fire. Shame if something happened to your stock." The threat in his warning was clear. After Coleman left, Clara Yautotawa and Jonas sat in heavy silence. "He knows about the papers," Clara said finally. "Maybe, or maybe he's fishing." Jonas rubbed his face. "Either way, we need to be ready. I'll have Miguel start sleeping in the barn. Keep watch on the horses." "And us." Jonas looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "Might be safer if you moved into the main house. Your cabin's too isolated if trouble comes." The suggestion hung between them, loaded with implications. They'd maintained careful boundaries, separate quarters preserving the fiction of their arrangement. But Coleman's visit had shifted something. "All right," Clara said quietly. "For safety." That night, She packed her few belongings and moved into the small room adjoining Jonas's Sarah's sewing room, converted hastily with a narrow bed and washstand. Through the thin wall, she could hear Jonas moving about, the creak of floorboards marking his restless pacing. She understood the feeling. The walls were closing in, Talbot's web tightening around them. The papers under her bed seemed to pulse with dangerous knowledge. Tomorrow, she decided, they would examine them more closely, try to understand what Thomas had discovered that was worth killing for. But tonight, she lay awake listening to the desert wind and thinking about the man in the next room scarred by violence, haunted by loss, yet still standing guard against the darkness. Near midnight, a sound made her sit up soft footsteps on the porch, too careful to be friendly. She slipped from bed, reaching for the derringer Jonas had insisted she keep close. Through the window, moonlight revealed two figures approaching the barn. Clara didn't think. She moved to Jonas's door, knocking softly. "Someone's here!" He was dressed and armed in seconds, moving with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to danger. Together they slipped out the back, using shadows for cover. The intruders were at the barn door, working at the lock. Clara recognized one Rourke, Talbot's enforcer, lean and dangerous as a rattlesnake. The other was younger, nervous. "Said just scare them," the younger one was whispering. "Nobody said nothing about—" "Plans change." Rourke cut him off. "Few dead horses, maybe a fire. They'll get the message." Clara felt Jonas tense beside her. The horses were his life, his redemption. She touched his arm, a warning to wait. But Miguel had other plans. The old vaquero emerged from the shadows of the barn, shotgun leveled. "You want to hurt these horses? You go through me." Rourke's hand moved to his gun. "Happy to oblige, old man." Everything happened at once. Jonas stepped from cover, his voice carrying deadly calm. "Touch that gun and die, Rourke." Rourke froze, calculating odds. The younger man made a fatal error, drawing his pistol in panic. Jonas's gun cleared leather faster than thought, the shot echoing across the desert. The young man spun and fell. Jim Rourke started forward. "Don't!" Jonas's gun never wavered. "Take your friend and go. Tell Talbot if he wants my land. He comes himself. No more hired guns, no more games." Rourke's face twisted with rage, but he helped the wounded man to his feet. "This ain't over. Read." "No, but next time, you won't walk away." They watched the intruders stumble into the darkness. Only then did Clara realize she'd been holding her breath. Her derringer clutched uselessly in her hand. "You all right?" Jonas asked. "Yes, Miguel. Si, señora. These old bones still good for something." But Clara saw the way Jonas's hands trembled slightly as he holstered his gun. The violence he'd tried to leave behind had found him again, brought to his door by her presence. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't." His voice was rough. "This isn't your fault." "Isn't it, if I hadn't come here?" Then Talbot would have found another excuse. He's been circling for years, waiting for weakness. Jonas looked at her, moonlight silvering his features. "You're not my weakness, Clara. You're the reason I'm going to fight instead of run." The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Clara thought of the ring on her finger, the lie that was becoming something else, something dangerous in its own way. Inside, she helped Jonas tend the graze on his arm, where the young gunman's wild shot had found partial mark. His shirt came away bloody, revealing not just the new wound, but a map of old violence scars crossing his chest and arms like accusations. "My God," Clara breathed. "How are you still alive?" "Stubbornness, mostly." He winced as she cleaned the wound. "And luck. Though Sarah used to say it was because the devil didn't want me yet. Sarah was wrong." Clara's hands were gentle but sure. "You're not the monster you think you are. You don't know what I've done." "I know what you haven't done. You haven't given up. You haven't let the darkness win." She tied off the bandage. That has to count for something. Jonas caught her hand before she could pull away. "Clara!" A shout from outside broke the moment. Miguel's voice, urgent. They rushed out to find the horizon glowing orange. Fire not at their ranch, but beyond. "The Thompson place," Miguel said. 5 miles east." Jonas swore. Jake Thompson was Pete's cousin, has a wife and 3 kids. They could do nothing but watch the distant flames and know that Talbot's message was clear. Those who stood with Jonas Reed would burn. "This is just the beginning," Jonas said quietly. Clara thought of Thomas's papers, of the secrets that might end this before more innocents suffered. Tomorrow, she would study every line, every notation. There had to be something there, some leverage to break Talbot's hold. But tonight, she stood beside Jonas and watched someone's life turn to ash on the wind, knowing that their carefully built walls between past and present, between truth and fiction, were crumbling as surely as the Thompson homestead. The ring on her finger caught the firelight, and Clara wondered if Sarah had stood here once, watching violence creep closer, knowing her husband would meet it head-on. The difference was, Sarah had been an innocent. Clara was learning she was anything but. Dawn broke gray and bitter over the Double R ranch, matching Clara's mood as she spread Thomas's papers across the kitchen table. Jonas sat across from her, both of them running on coffee and determination after a sleepless night. The Thompson family had survived the fire, but their home was gone another casualty in Talbot's war. "Look at this." Clara pointed to a notation in Thomas's careful script. "These aren't just blast calculations. They're timed sequences. He was planning something specific." Jonas studied the markings. Controlled demolition. But why? What's down there worth destroying an entire mine? Before Clara could answer, Miguel burst through the door. "Riders coming! 6, maybe 7. They moved quickly, Jonas checking his guns while Clara tucked the papers away. But the approaching group carried a white flag, an unusual sight in the territory. "That's Judge Harland," Jonas said, recognizing the lead rider. "And Reverend Pearson." "What the hell?" The delegation dismounted in the yard, their faces grave. Judge Harland, a man who'd held court in 3 territories, stepped forward. "Reed, Mrs. Reed." He nodded to Clara, the title still strange on others' lips. "We're here on behalf of the town council." "Since when does Talbot send messengers?" Jonas asked. "This isn't from Talbot. It's from those of us who still believe in law." The judge's weathered face showed strain. "There's to be a meeting. Tonight. Neutral ground at the church. We're trying to prevent a war." Reverend Pearson, younger and idealistic, added, "Too much blood has been spilled already. The Thompson fire. The attempt on your stock, it has to stop." "Tell that to Talbot," Jonas said flatly. "We intend to—" "He's agreed to attend. To negotiate." Judge Harland met Jonas's skeptical gaze. "I know what you're thinking, but there are witnesses gathering, merchants, ranchers, people tired of living in fear. Even Talbot won't dare violence in a church before half the town." Clara stepped forward. "What does he want to negotiate?" "A buyout, fair market value for your ranch, safe passage out of the territory." The judge paused. "And any documents relating to the late Mr. Mayfield's work." Jonas laughed, harsh and bitter. "Fair market value from a man who burns out families." "It's better than more bloodshed," Reverend Pearson insisted. "Please, at least come. Hear him out." After they left, Jonas and Clara stood in tense silence. "It's a trap," Jonas said. "Maybe. Or maybe it's a chance to end this without more innocent people getting hurt." Clara touched his arm. "We should go, but we go prepared." That afternoon, Clara found herself in an unexpected place, Sarah's grave. The small cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the ranch, marked by a simple stone cross. She'd avoided it until now, feeling like an intruder on private grief. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, kneeling to clear away dried brush. "For wearing your ring, for taking your place. I know it wasn't supposed to be like this." The wind whispered through the sage, carrying the scent of coming rain. Clara thought about the woman who'd loved Jonas, who'd died for the sin of that love. "I'll try to keep him safe," she promised, though God knows he doesn't make it easy. She used to say the same thing. Clara turned to find Jonas behind her, hat in hand. "I didn't hear you." "I'm sorry, I saw you heading up here," and he moved to stand beside the grave. "I haven't been here in months. Couldn't face it." They stood together, two people bound by loss and lies, sharing a moment of truth. "Tell me about her," Clara said softly. Jonas was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, she laughed at everything, found joy in the smallest things, first flowers of spring, a well-broke horse, terrible jokes I'd heard in town. She made this place live. "She sounds wonderful." "She was too good for what I brought to her door." Jonas knelt, touching the stone. "The night she died, we'd argued. She wanted me to sell, to leave the territory. Said she had a bad feeling about the men coming around. I called her foolish, said I was done running." His voice broke slightly. "Last words I said to her were angry ones. Last words she said were, 'I love you anyway.'" Clara's throat tightened. Without thinking, she placed her hand over his on the stone. She knew. Women always know what's in their men's hearts, even when the men themselves don't. Jonas turned his hand, their fingers intertwining. "What's in my heart now would terrify her. Tell me." He stood, pulling her up with him, their bodies suddenly close. "You, God help me, Clara, you're in my heart. Not as her replacement, not as some ghost of what I lost. You—" The words hung between them, dangerous as loaded guns. Clara knew she should step back, maintain the fiction that kept them safe. Instead, she found herself leaning closer. "Jonas!" His kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, nothing like she'd expected from a man so comfortable with violence. His hands framed her face carefully, as if she might shatter. Clara responded despite herself, tasting coffee and desperation, feeling the tremor that ran through him. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, reality crashed back. "I'm sorry," Jonas said roughly. "I had no right." "Stop apologizing." Clara pressed her fingers to his lips. "We're not sorry. Scared, maybe confused, but not sorry." They made their way back to the house in charged silence. Everything had shifted, the careful boundaries dissolved, the pretense stripped away. What remained was raw and real and impossibly complicated. As evening approached, they prepared for the meeting with grim efficiency. Jonas cleaned and loaded his guns while Clara changed into her best dress, Sarah's dress. Really. But that distinction was fading like everything else. "Whatever happens," Jonas said as they prepared to leave, "stay close. If shooting starts—" "I know. Get to cover." Clara checked the derringer in her pocket. "Though I'm getting tired of running. Rather you run than die." "Same to you." They rode to town as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of warning. The church sat at the far end of Main Street, its whitewashed walls glowing in the dying light. Already, wagons and horses filled the yard more than expected. Inside, the pews were packed. Clara recognized faces from town shopkeepers, ranchers, even some of Talbot's own workers. At the front, Talbot sat like a king holding court, Rourke at his shoulder. "Ah, the happy couple," Talbot said as they entered. "Please, join us. We have much to discuss." They took seats across the aisle, Jonas positioning himself with clear sight lines to both exits. Judge Harlan stood at the pulpit, clearly uncomfortable with the tension crackling through the sacred space. "We're here to find peaceful resolution," the judge began. "Mr. Talbot has made an offer. $10,000 for the ranch, Talbot interrupted. Plus safe passage for Mr. and Mrs. Reed. More than generous. Considering what? Jonas asked evenly. Considering the alternatives. Talbot's smile was cold. This territory's getting civilized. Reed, no room for men with your history, or for women who harbor stolen property. Clara felt the crowd's attention shift to her. I have nothing of yours, Mr. Talbot. Your late husband thought differently. Poor Thomas, so clever with explosives, yet so clumsy with loyalties. Talbot stood, addressing the crowd. You all know me. I've brought prosperity to this region. Jobs. Growth. All I ask is cooperation. You brought fear. A voice called from the back. Jake Thompson, face still bearing burns from the fire. You burned out my family. Accidents happen, Talbot said smoothly, especially to those who associate with killers. The temperature in the room dropped. Jonas remained still, but Clara saw his hand move slightly toward his gun. Speaking of killers, Talbot continued. Shall I tell these good people about Nogales? Read about the Wells Fargo job, about the marshal you... Enough. Judge Harlan's gavel cracked. We're not here to... The church doors burst open. Sheriff Coleman entered. Supporting a bloodied figure the young gunman Jonas had wounded at the ranch. Boy's got something to say. Coleman announced. About who hired him. The wounded man's voice was weak but clear. It was Talbot. Hired us to burn the Reed place, kill the horses, make it look like revenge for Pete. Chaos erupted. Accusations flew as Talbot's men reached for weapons. Jonas moved faster, pulling Clara behind a pew as the first shots rang out. So much for negotiation, Clara muttered, drawing her derringer. The church became a battlefield. Jonas returned fire with deadly precision while Clara helped shepherd panicked townspeople toward the exits. She saw Reverend Pearson fall, clutching his shoulder. Judge Harlan dove behind his pulpit. Through the melee, Talbot's voice rang out. Reed, face me like a man. Jonas rose from cover, and suddenly, the shooting stopped. The two men faced each other down the center aisle, others scrambling out of the line of fire. Just you and me, Talbot, Jonas said. That's what you want, isn't it, to prove you're faster? I don't need to prove anything, but killing you myself, that'll be satisfaction. Clara watched, heart pounding. As the two men squared off, this was the old way. The code of the frontier dispute settled in lead and blood. They drew simultaneously. Thunder filled the church. Talbot staggered, red spreading across his vest. His shot went wide, shattering a window. But Rourke was already moving, his gun clearing leather, aimed at Jonas's exposed back. Clara didn't think she fired, her small derringer cracking. Rourke spun, cursing, his shot going wild. Jonas finished him with cold efficiency. In the aftermath, as Coleman restored order and the wounded were tended, Clara found herself standing over Talbot's body. The man who'd caused so much pain looked small in death, his empire reduced to cooling flesh. It's over, Jonas said beside her. But Clara thought of Thomas's papers, still hidden, still holding secrets. Not quite, not until we know why Thomas died. Outside, rain began to fall, the first in months. It washed the blood from the church steps and brought the smell of sage and new beginnings. They rode home through the storm, clothes soaked, souls lighter despite the violence. At the ranch, they stood dripping in the kitchen, the weight of survival making them giddy. We're alive, Clara said, half laughing, half crying. We are. Jonas pulled her close, heedless of their sodden clothes. God help us. We are. This time when he kissed her, there was nothing hesitant about it. Clara responded with all the pent-up fear and relief and growing love she'd been denying. They clung together like survivors of a shipwreck, finding solid ground in each other. When they finally parted, Jonas rested his forehead against hers. What happens now? Now, Clara smiled, fierce and free. Now we stop pretending. The ring on her finger caught the lamplight, Sarah's ring. Her ring. Symbol of a marriage that had begun in deception but was becoming truth. Outside, the storm raged. But inside, two battered souls found shelter in each other. Tomorrow would bring questions, revelations about Thomas, decisions about the future. But tonight, they were simply Jonas and Clara, no longer widow and gunman. But something new, forged in fire and sealed in blood. The desert had tried to break them. Instead, it had made them whole. The morning after the church shooting dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean. Clara woke in her narrow bed, still in Sarah's sewing room, despite everything that had changed between them. She could hear Jonas moving about the kitchen, the familiar sounds of morning routine somehow different now. She dressed carefully, pinning her hair with trembling fingers. Everything felt fragile, new-made, like the desert after rain. When she entered the kitchen, Jonas looked up from the stove, and the warmth in his eyes made her breath catch. "Coffee's ready," he said simply, but his hand lingered as he passed her the cup, fingers brushing hers with deliberate tenderness. They were still navigating this new territory when hoofbeats announced visitors. Sheriff Coleman arrived with Judge Harland and a man Clara didn't recognize, elderly, well-dressed despite the dust of travel. Mrs. Reed. Mr. Reed. The stranger tipped his hat. "Name's William Forsythe. I represent the Consolidated Mining Consortium." Jonas tensed. "If you're here about Talbot's operations..." "In a way." Forsythe accepted the offered coffee with surprising grace. "But I'm more interested in Thomas Mayfield. You see, we hired him." Clara's cup rattled against its saucer. "What?" "Your husband, ma'am, was working for us, investigating certain irregularities in Talbot's books. We suspected he was skimming from investors, possibly running illegal operations alongside the legitimate mining." Thomas was a spy. The word tasted bitter. An investigator. We needed someone with mining expertise who could work from the inside. Forsythe's weathered face showed genuine regret. "We never imagined it would cost him his life." Jonas leaned forward. "What did he find?" "That's what we're hoping, Mrs. Reed can tell us. Thomas was supposed to deliver a report. He sent word he'd found something significant, but he died before the meeting." Clara rose abruptly. Decision made. Minutes later, she returned with Thomas's hidden papers, spreading them across the table with hands that barely shook. Forsythe examined them with growing excitement. "My God, he found it!" "Found what?" Coleman demanded. "The Emperor's tomb." At their blank looks, Forsythe explained. "A massive silver vein Talbot discovered years ago. Instead of reporting it, he's been mining it secretly, shipping ore through back channels, keeping the profits off the books." Judge Harland whistled low. "That's fraud on a massive scale. The investors..." "We're being robbed blind." Forsythe traced the tunnel markings. But Thomas went further. These calculations he was planning to seal the illegal operation, make it look like a cave-in. "To preserve evidence," Jonas said, understanding dawning. "Trap Talbot's secret where investigators could find it." "Exactly, but Talbot must have suspected. That powder accident?" Forsythe shook his head. "It was murder, pure and simple." Clara sank back into her chair, the truth hitting like a physical blow. Thomas hadn't been planning sabotage, he'd been trying to expose corruption. He died a hero, not a conspirator. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we finish what your husband started," Forsythe said, "with Talbot dead. His operation is in chaos. These documents give us what we need to investigate, prosecute his associates, return stolen funds to investors." "And Mrs. Reed..." Jonas's protective instinct was evident. "Will be compensated, of course. Thomas was our employee. His widow is entitled to, let's say, $5,000 and our gratitude. It was more money than Clara had ever imagined. Enough for a new life anywhere. The freedom she'd thought lost forever. After the officials left, promising to return with legal documents, Clara and Jonas sat in loaded silence. $5,000, Clara said finally. I could go anywhere. Start fresh? You could. Jonas's voice was carefully neutral. Is that what you want for me to go? He looked at her then, walls down, everything written on his scarred face. What I want is for you to stay, but not because you have nowhere else to go, not because you need protection, because you choose to. Clara stood, moving around the table to face him. I chose weeks ago. That first night, when you offered me dignity instead of degradation. Every day since. When you showed me strength could be gentle and survival didn't mean surrender. Clara! I'm not finished. She took his hands, feeling the calluses and scars, the history written in flesh. I know you loved Sarah. I know I can't replace... You're not replacing anyone. Jonas pulled her closer. You're carving out your own place. Here. He pressed her hand to his chest, over his heart. It's not about forgetting Sarah. It's about having room for you. This time when they kissed, it was with full understanding, two damaged souls choosing healing, choosing each other. When they parted, Clara laughed, breathless and bright. So I suppose this makes us actually married now. If you'll have me... Jonas grew serious. I know it started as a lie, but the best truths often do. Clara touched the ring that had become hers through circumstance and choice. Though we might want Reverend Pearson to make it official. Once his shoulder heals... Tomorrow, Jonas promised. Or next week, whenever you're ready. I've been ready since you slid this ring on my finger, Clara admitted. I just needed time to admit it. They were interrupted by Miguel calling from the yard. A wagon approached, laden with supplies and furniture. What's this? Clara asked as they emerged. The driver, a man she recognized from town, touched his hat. Delivery from the Merchants Association? Ma'am. With thanks for ending Talbot's reign. The wagon held practical treasures, bolts of fabric, kitchen supplies, even a rocking chair that made Clara think of quiet evenings ahead. But it was the last item that made her gasp a piano, small and slightly battered but intact. You play? Jonas asked. Seeing her expression. I used to, before Thomas, before... She ran her fingers over the keys, coaxing out a tentative melody. I thought I'd forgotten. Seems the town hasn't forgotten you. What you both did in that church, people are calling you heroes. We're not heroes, Clara protested. We're just survivors who got lucky. Sometimes that's the same thing. That evening, as Clara prepared dinner in a kitchen now properly stocked, she found herself humming. Jonas watched from the doorway, and she caught him smiling, a real smile that transformed his weathered features. What? Just thinking Sarah would have liked you. Would have liked seeing this place alive again. Tell me more about her. Not the pain, the joy. So Jonas talked as Clara cooked, sharing memories that hadn't seen light in years. Sarah teaching him to dance in this very kitchen. Sarah trying to break a Mustang and ending up in the water trough. Sarah's terrible singing that scared the chickens. She sounds wonderful, Clara said, meaning it. She was, and so are you. Different, but equally wonderful. Jonas stood, moving behind her, arms encircling her waist. I thought I'd never feel this again, thought I didn't deserve to. Clara leaned back into his embrace. We both deserve happiness. Jonas, we've paid for it in blood and tears. They stood together as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and promise. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal proceedings, the ranch to run, a marriage to formalize. But tonight they had peace. Later. As Clara played the donated piano rusty but improving, Jonas sat nearby, cleaning tack and watching her with an expression of wonder. The music filled the house, chasing shadows from corners too long dark. "Play something happy," he requested. "I don't know much happy music anymore." "Then make some up. We're writing new stories now." So Clara improvised, weaving melodies that spoke of survival and hope, of love found in unlikely places. Jonas eventually joined her on the bench, his solid presence warming her side. "I should tell you," he said during a pause. "I can't dance. Sarah tried to teach me, but I've got 2 left feet. Good thing I'm patient. Good thing indeed." He kissed her temple, gentle as morning light. "Though I warn you, I step on toes. I've survived worse than stepped on toes." They laughed together, the sound foreign in a house too long acquainted with grief. Outside, coyotes called to the rising moon, but the sound no longer seemed lonely. It was just the desert singing its ancient song, backdrop to new beginnings. "I love you," Jonas said suddenly, the words seemingly surprised out of him. "I didn't think I'd say that again, but I do. I love you, Clara Mayfield Reed." "Soon to be officially Reed," she corrected, heart full. "And I love you, Jonas, not in spite of your scars or your past, but because of how you've survived them." They sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of coffee and forever. When they finally retired to separate rooms, still, propriety maintained for one more night, Clara lay wakeful but content. Through the wall, she could hear Jonas moving about, probably checking windows and doors out of habit. Guardian still, protector always, but no longer alone in his vigil. Tomorrow, Reverend Pearson would speak words over them. Tomorrow, the investigation into Talbot's crimes would begin. Tomorrow, the future would start demanding attention. But tonight, Clara Mayfield, soon to be Reed in truth, fell asleep to the sound of desert wind and the knowledge that home was no longer a place she'd lost, but one she'd found in the most unlikely circumstances. The ring on her finger caught moonlight through the window. Sarah's ring. Her ring. Symbol of love that transcended death and deception to find truth. In the morning, it would witness vows spoken in honesty rather than desperation. For now, it simply gleamed, a promise kept and a promise yet to be made. Golden as the dawn that would surely come. The church bells rang across Silver Creek on a crisp October morning, their bronze voices carrying over the desert like a benediction. Clara stood before the mirror in the bedroom she now shared with Jonas, adjusting the simple blue dress she'd chosen for their wedding, their real wedding. "You look beautiful," Martha said from the doorway. The former saloon worker had become an unexpected friend, running the boarding house now that Hutchins had fled town. "Nervous?" "No," Clara said, surprised to find it true. "I've been married to him in my heart for weeks now. This is just making it official." Martha helped pin wildflowers in Clara's hair desert blooms that Jonas had gathered that morning. "Never thought I'd see Jonas Reed standing at an altar again. You've worked a miracle." "We've worked it together, both of us learning to live again." The church had been repaired since the shootout, though bullet holes still scarred some pews' reminders of the violence that had brought them together. Now it overflowed with townspeople, many who'd found courage to stand against Talbot only after Jonas and Clara showed the way. Jonas waited at the altar, Miguel at his side as best man. He wore his best shirt and a new vest, but it was the expression on his face that transformed him, joy unmarred by shadows. Love without reservation. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Pearson began, his arm still in a sling but his voice strong. "We gather today to witness something rare in our harsh land, love born from tragedy, hope risen from ashes." Clara barely heard the traditional words. Her attention was fixed on Jonas, on the way his hands trembled slightly as he took hers, on the tears he didn't try to hide when he spoke his vows. "Clara," he said, voice rough with emotion, You came into my life when I'd given up on living, only surviving. You showed me that the past doesn't have to define the future, that broken things can be mended stronger than before. I promise to protect you, provide for you, and love you until my last breath and probably beyond that, if the Lord allows." Clara's own voice was steady despite her tears. "Jonas, you offered me dignity when the world would have stripped it away. You gave me shelter, purpose, and most importantly, the freedom to choose my own path. I choose you, today and always. I promise to stand beside you in sunshine and storm, to help you carry whatever burdens come, and to fill our home with laughter and music and life." When Reverend Pearson pronounced them man and wife, Jonas kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes. The congregation erupted in cheers, cowboys tossing their hats and women dabbing at their faces. The reception filled the churchyard with tables groaning under the weight of donated food. It seemed the whole territory had contributed pies and cakes, roasted meats, barrels of cider. Musicians struck up lively tunes, and couples began to dance despite the afternoon heat. "Hey, Mrs. Reed." Judge Harland approached, smiling broadly. "Might I have this dance?" Clara glanced at Jonas, who nodded with amusement. "Fair warning, Judge, I haven't danced in years. Neither has half the territory, but we're all trying." As they moved through the simple steps, the judge spoke quietly. "Wanted you to know Forsyth's investigation is bearing fruit. 3 of Talbot's associates are already in custody. The stolen funds will be returned to investors, and there's talk of naming the new school after Thomas." "He would have liked that," Clara said, meaning it. Her grief for Thomas had mellowed into something bearable sorrow for a life cut short, but no longer the sharp agony of early widowhood. When the dance ended, she found Jonas deep in conversation with Sheriff Coleman. Both men looked serious despite the festive atmosphere. "Trouble?" she asked, slipping her hand into Jonas's. "Maybe nothing," Coleman said. "But there's been a stranger in town, asking questions about Jonas, about the old days." Jonas's expression hardened. "Description." "Tall, thin, scar through his left eyebrow. Carries himself like a gunfighter." Clara felt Jonas tense. "Luke Morrison." "Who's Luke Morrison?" Clara asked. "Someone from the past who should have stayed there." Jonas forced a smile. "But not today. Today's for celebrating." They danced then. Jonas surprisingly graceful despite his claims of 2 left feet. Around them, Silver Creek celebrated not just a wedding but a new beginning. Talbot's reign ended. Hope restored. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold, Jonas and Clara prepared to leave. Rice rained down as they made their way to the wagon, decorated with ribbons and wildflowers by enthusiastic townswomen. "Where are we going?" Clara asked as Jonas helped her up. "Home, of course, but Miguel's staying in town tonight. Figured we deserved one night of real privacy." Clara blushed but smiled. Practical man. "I have my moments." The ride home was quiet, charged with anticipation. The ranch looked different in the dying light, no longer a refuge or a hideout, but truly home, their home. Inside, Clara found the house transformed. Candles flickered on every surface. Wildflowers filled mason jars, and the bed their bed now was turned down with new linens. "Miguel," she guessed. "And Martha, and half the church ladies, I suspect." Jonas seemed suddenly uncertain. "If it's too much." Clara silenced him with a kiss. "It's perfect." Later, as they lay entwined in the candlelight, Clara traced the scars on Jonas's chest, each one a story of survival, of the violence he'd endured and inflicted. "Tell me about Luke Morrison," she said quietly. Jonas sighed, pulling her closer. "We rode together in the bad days, partners in things I'm not proud of. Last I heard, he was in prison in Texas." "But not anymore." "Apparently not." He kissed her forehead. "If he comes here, we'll face him together." like we faced everything else. You sure you want this life? Clara, there'll always be ghosts. Men like Morrison who remember what I was. What you were shaped, who you are. Clara said firmly, and who you are is the man I love, ghosts and all. They made love again as the moon rose, gentle and fierce by turns, writing new memories over old wounds. When they finally slept, it was deeply, peacefully, wrapped in each other in the certainty of belonging. Clara woke near dawn to find Jonas gone. Panic flared until she heard his voice from the porch, low and tense. She wrapped the shawl around herself and padded barefoot to the door. A man sat on horseback in the yard, tall, thin, with a scar through his left eyebrow. Luke Morrison. His hand rested casually near his gun, and his smile was cold as winter wind. Congratulations on the wedding. Jonas heard about it in town. The widow Mayfield quite a step up from your usual company. What do you want? Luke. What I've always wanted. What you owe me. You left me behind in Amarillo. Partner. Took the gold and ran while I took the fall. I left you passed out drunk after you killed that woman. Any gold we had went to her children. Morrison's face darkened. Noble Jonas Reed. Always had to play the white knight, even when your hands were dirty as mine. Clara stepped onto the porch, the derringer she'd grabbed hidden in the folds of her shawl. Mr. Morrison, is it you're not welcome here? Morrison's eyes flicked to her, taking in her state of undress, the intimacy of the scene. So it's true, the killer got himself a respectable wife. Does she know? Jonas about Nogales, about the marshal, and... I know enough, Clara interrupted. I know the man he is now. That's all that matters. Is it? Morrison laughed. How about this? Then I'll be staying in town a few days, catching up with old friends, unless, of course, my old partner wants to make it worth my while to leave. Get off my land, Jonas said quietly. Don't come back. Your land. Morrison wheeled his horse around. For now. But things change. Partner. Things always change. After he rode off, Jonas sagged against the porch rail. Clara moved to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. How much does he want? Everything. Always has. Jonas turned in her arms. Clara, I won't pay him. If I do, he'll never stop coming back. I know. She met his eyes steadily. So we face him, like we faced Talbot. Talbot was a businessman playing at being hard. Morrison is a killer, pure and simple. So were you, once, but you changed. You chose different. Because I had something to lose. Morrison has nothing but hate and old grudges. They went inside as the sun rose. The honeymoon mood shattered, but their unity intact. Clara made coffee while Jonas cleaned his guns, domestic ritual mixed with preparation for war. I could leave, Jonas said suddenly. Draw him off. Keep you safe. You could try. Clara set his cup down hard enough to slosh. But I'd follow. We're married. Jonas Reed. For better or worse, this is worse. We'll get through it. How did I get lucky enough to find you? Luck had nothing to do with it. Clara moved to sit in his lap, needing the closeness. We were both broken. We just happened to have pieces that fit together. They spent the day normally tending horses, fixing fence, the ordinary tasks that kept a ranch running, but Clara saw how Jonas checked the horizon, how his hand never strayed far from his gun. That evening, as she played piano, their nightly ritual, now a rider approached, but instead of Morrison, it was Jake Thompson, still bearing scars from the fire. Mr. Reed. Mrs. Reed. He hat in hand, nervous. Wanted to thank you proper for what you did, stopping Talbot, and to warn you that Morrison fellow's been buying drinks, telling stories. Ugly stories. Let him talk. Jonas said, Thing is, some folks are listening. Newer arrivals who don't know what you've done for this town. He's stirring up trouble." After Thompson left, Clara found Jonas standing at Sarah's grave, shoulders bowed with the weight of the past. "Maybe she was the lucky one," he said as Clara joined him. "Died before the ugliness caught up." "Don't!" Clara's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare give up now! Not when we've come so far. I won't let him hurt you. And I won't let him destroy you. We're stronger together. Jonas, that's why we'll win." They stood together in the gathering darkness, hands linked, facing whatever storm was brewing. In the distance, a coyote called not lonely now, but defiant, claiming its territory against all challengers. "I love you," Jonas said. Whatever happens, we face it together. That's what marriage means." The stars emerged one by one, ancient witnesses to human struggle. Below them, two souls who'd found each other against all odds, prepared for one more battle. One more test of the love forged in desert fire. The ring on Clara's finger, Sarah's ring. Her ring. Their ring caught the starlight, unbreakable as the promises it represented. 3 days after Morrison's visit, the confrontation came with the sudden violence of a desert storm. Clara was in the garden when she heard the horses too many for friendly callers. She ran for the house, but Morrison's men were already spreading out, cutting off escape routes. Jonas emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, Miguel beside him. They were outnumbered 4-1, but Jonas's face showed no fear, only the cold calculation of a man who'd faced worse odds. "Thought about your answer, partner," Morrison called from the yard. He'd brought 7 men, all wearing the hard look of hired guns. Same as before. Jonas replied, "Get off my land." "See, that's the problem." Morrison dismounted slowly, theatrical in his confidence. "I did some checking. This land bought with money from the Amarillo job. Makes it half mine by rights." Clara stepped onto the porch, her shotgun visible. "Any claim you had ended when you chose murder over partnership." Morrison's laugh was ugly. "Listen to the school marm with a scattergun. Jonas, you sure know how to pick them. First that delicate flower Sarah, now this one." The mention of Sarah's name hit Jonas like a physical blow, but his aim never wavered. Clara saw his finger tighten on the trigger and knew Morrison had made a fatal error. "Don't," she called softly. "He's trying to provoke you, make you shoot first so his men have excuse." "Smart woman," Morrison acknowledged. "But here's the thing, I don't need excuses anymore. The good people of Silver Creek have heard all about Jonas Reed's bloody past, how he murdered a lawman in cold blood, how he robbed stages and banks. They're not so keen on their hero now." "You're lying," Clara said, though she'd heard the whispers in town, seen the suspicious looks. "Am I? Why don't you ask your husband about Marshal Tom Brady? Good man, family man, shot in the back outside Tucson. Or the Wells Fargo guard who begged for his life. Jonas put a bullet in him anyway." Each word was calculated to hurt, to drive wedges between Jonas and everything he'd built. Clara watched her husband's face, saw the weight of truth in his eyes. "Tell her, Jonas," Morrison pressed. "Tell your sweet wife what kind of man she married." "She knows," Jonas said quietly. "Knows I've done terrible things. Knows I'm trying to be better." "Better," Morrison spat. "You can't wash blood off your hands with good intentions." "Maybe not." Clara stepped forward, moving to stand beside Jonas. "But he's tried. What have you done except wallow in hate?" The standoff stretched taut. 8 guns against 3. Violence hanging in the air like smoke. Then came unexpected Salvation hoofbeats approaching fast. Sheriff Coleman led a group of townsmen, all armed, spreading out to surround Morrison's men. "Stand down, Morrison." Coleman ordered. "You're outnumbered now." Morrison's face twisted with rage. "You'd side with a killer." "I'm siding with the law, and right now, you're the one threatening peaceful citizens." Coleman's voice carried authority. "You and your men have 10 minutes to clear out of the territory." For a moment, Clara thought Morrison might draw anyway, might choose a bloody end over retreat. Then he smiled, cold and promising. "This isn't over. Jonas, you can't hide behind your new life forever. Someday, somewhere, we'll settle accounts." He mounted up, his men following reluctantly. As they rode away, Jonas lowered his rifle with hands that shook slightly. "Thank you," he said to Coleman and the townsmen. "I know what Morrison's been saying. Know some of you probably believe it." Jake Thompson spoke up. "What we believe is that you saved this town from Talbot, that you've been a good neighbor and a fair man. Whatever you were before, that's who you are now." Others nodded agreement, though Clara noticed not all looked convinced. The seeds Morrison had planted would grow, poisoning opinions, making life in Silver Creek harder. After the crowd dispersed, Jonas slumped against the porch rail. He'll be back. If not him, then others. There's always someone remembering, someone wanting payback. Then we'll be ready, Clara said firmly. "Jonas, look at me. Those men came to help. This community stood with you." "Some did. Others will turn away now, knowing the truth. Knowing Morrison's version of truth." Clara took his face in her hands. "I need to know the marshal. The guard did it happen like he said." Jonas closed his eyes. "The marshal was reaching for his gun. It was him or me. But yes, I shot first. The guard, Morrison shot him, not me. But I was there. I didn't stop it." "Could you have... maybe... I don't know. I was different then. Clara, harder, caring about nothing but survival and the next score." "What changed?" "Sarah. Meeting her, seeing myself through her eyes, realizing I could be more than a weapon for hire." He looked at Clara with naked vulnerability. "Then losing her, thinking I'd never have another chance, until you." Clara kissed him then, pouring all her love and acceptance into the gesture. When they parted, she saw tears on his weathered cheeks. "We're not running," she said. "This is our home, our life. Morrison doesn't get to take that." That night, as they lay together, Clara felt Jonas's restlessness. He rose several times to check windows, to walk the perimeter. The third time, she followed. "Can't sleep." "Hard to sleep when you're waiting for a bullet." They stood together on the porch, watching stars wheel overhead. The desert was quiet, but it was the quiet of held breath, of waiting. "Tell me about the good times," Clara said. "Before it all went wrong, you must have had dreams once." Jonas was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Wanted to raise horses. Even then, I was good with them. Thought maybe I'd have a little spread. Nothing fancy. Find a girl, have kids, normal dreams." "What happened?" "Drought. Lost the family farm. Pa shot himself rather than face failure. Ma died of grief. I was 16, angry at the world. Fell in with bad men who taught me my fast draw could earn more than honest work ever would." Clara leaned into him. "You were a child, alone and hurting." "Doesn't excuse what I became." "No, but it explains it." She turned to face him. "Jonas, you've punished yourself enough. Sarah's death wasn't your fault. The men you killed in your outlaw days, most would have killed you first. You've paid and paid. When is it enough?" "When men like Morrison stop coming, when the past stops reaching for me. That may never happen, so what we live in fear forever, always looking over shoulders." Clara's voice rose with passion. "No, I won't do it, and I won't let you do it either." The next morning brought unexpected visitors, Forsyth and a federal marshal named Daniel Crenshaw. They carried official-looking documents and grave expressions. "Mrs. Reed. Mr. Reed." Forsyth began. "We've had word about Luke Morrison's presence here." "If you're here to arrest me for old crimes," Jonas started. "On the contrary," Marshal Crenshaw interrupted. "We're here to offer you a deal. Morrison is wanted in 3 territories: murder, robbery, assault, We need help bringing him in." Clara felt Jonas tense. "You want me to hunt my former partner?" "We want you to end this. Legally, permanently." Crenshaw leaned forward. "In exchange, full amnesty for any crimes committed before 1870. A clean slate, Mr. Reed." "Why would you offer that?" Forsyth answered. "Because Thomas Mayfield's work exposed corruption throughout the territory. Because you and Mrs. Reed risked everything to stop Talbot. Because sometimes justice means knowing when to forgive the past to secure the future." Jonas looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She nodded. "Morrison's dangerous," Jonas warned. "This won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Crenshaw said. They spent the day planning. Morrison had holed up in an abandoned mining camp in the mountains, gathering more men, planning something bigger than simple revenge. He always talked about one last score. Jonas remembered. Something to set him up permanent. Maybe. His eyes widened. The Emperor's tomb. Talbot's secret mine. Morrison must have heard about it. Figured with Talbot dead, he could claim it himself. Forsyth finished. "All that silver, unguarded now." "When do we move?" Clara asked. Jonas turned to her. "Clara, no, this is too dangerous." "We're partners. In everything." Her tone brooked no argument. "I'm coming." They rode out at dawn. Jonas, Clara, Marshal Crenshaw, and 6 deputized townsmen, including Jake Thompson. The mountains loomed purple against the lightening sky, hiding Morrison and his last stand. The abandoned camp sprawled across a narrow valley, buildings crumbling into desert reclamation. Morrison had posted guards, but Jonas knew the terrain, led them through hidden approaches. "There," he whispered, pointing to the mine entrance where men moved supplies. "They're loading up. Must have found Talbot's cache." The attack came swift and coordinated. Jonas and Crenshaw took the high ground while Clara and the others blocked escape routes. Gunfire erupted, echoing off canyon walls. Clara found herself behind a ore cart, trading shots with outlaws who'd expected easy wealth, not determined resistance. She saw Jonas moving through the combat like a force of nature, every shot precise, using skills honed in violence, now serving justice. Morrison emerged from the mine, silver dust in his hair, rage in his eyes. "Jonas, face me, you coward." "It's over, Luke," Jonas called back. "Surrender. Don't make me kill you." "Make you? You've been wanting this for years. Come on, partner. One last dance." They met in the open, 2 men shaped by violence, defined by choices. Morrison drew first, fast as lightning, but Jonas was faster, smoother, the gun an extension of will. Morrison staggered, looking down at the spreading red. "Always were. Better than me." Jonas caught him as he fell. "Why, Luke, why couldn't you let it go?" "Because letting go meant admitting I wasted my life." Morrison coughed, life fading. "You got out, found love. I just got older and meaner." He died there in the dust, still clutching stolen silver. Jonas closed his eyes gently, mourning not the man Morrison had become, but the friend he'd once been. The aftermath was swift. Surviving outlaws surrendered. The stolen silver was recovered, and Marshal Crenshaw produced the promised documents, full amnesty, signed and sealed. "You're free, Mr. Reed," he said. "The past is officially buried." That night, back at the ranch, Jonas stood at Sarah's grave, Clara beside him. He laid his guns on the stone, the tools of his trade, symbols of his past. "I'm done," he said quietly. "No more violence, no more looking backward." Clara squeezed his hand. "What will you do now?" "Raise horses, love my wife, maybe have those children I once dreamed about." He looked at her with hope. "If you're willing." "More than willing." Clara smiled through tears. We'll fill this ranch with life and laughter. Make it so full of future there's no room for past." They walked back to the house, hand in hand. Behind them, Jonas's guns rested on Sarah's grave, an offering, a promise, a farewell to all that had been. Inside, Clara played piano while Jonas sketched plans for expanding the horse operation. Outside, the desert bloomed with rare rain, washing the world clean. They had survived the worst loss, lies, violence, the weight of history. Now came the harder task, learning to live in peace, to trust in tomorrow, to build something lasting from the ashes of what had burned. But they would do it together. Two survivors become partners. Partners become lovers. Lovers become family. It was the oldest story in the West: redemption through love, freedom through courage, home carved from wilderness. The ring on Clara's finger caught the lamplight as her hands moved over the keys. Sarah's ring, her ring, their ring, symbol of all that was lost and all that was found, all that was mourned and all that was celebrated. In the desert night, coyotes sang their ancient song, but inside the ranch house, music played and dreams took root, and two hearts beat as one, finally free, finally home. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I hope you enjoyed following Clara and Jonas on their journey through the Wild West. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts about this tale of love, redemption, and second chances. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more captivating Western love stories. Give this video a thumbs up and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover this heartfelt tale. Your support means the world and helps keep these stories alive.